Suggesting to the government there that it reduce the number of scientific research stations it operates and turn the redundant places over to tourism.
Layers of its unmelted snow have sat untouched for 1 million years, and its glaciers are a haven to wildlife. But it is the attraction of setting foot where no human has set foot before, of having the chance to be in the world's last great wilderness, which makes it marketable. For scientists from the British Antarctic Survey now preparing to leave for Antarctica on a research mission, it's all highly troubling. They'll be studying ice shelves as part of a program investigating climate change. They'll be disappointed at the closure of research bases, but much more concerned by what would happen if the tourist industry took off.
The Australian proposals suggest that adventure tourism is one of the developments that they would be thinking about, and they also suggest that they would build an airstrip. Well, the airstrip is primarily for scientific support, but I think they would be under considerable pressure to allow tourist planes to use it.
In its report, Australia's Antarctic programme recommends retaining at least one of its existing research stations, but it adds that advancements in technology may mean the requirement for 3 stations diminishes. An increase in tourism could, they say, heighten awareness of Australian activities in the region. But Antarctica is claimed territory. No one owns it, while 7 countries believe they have rights on it. So, even if you ignore the arguments about science and the environment, does Australia have the right to invite more tourists in?
Well, it's an international area, and it's impossible, obviously, to stop anybody, but Australia has signed up to an international treaty which says it will do things in a particular way.
In 1912, in the most famously ill-fated expedition of modern times, Captain Robert Scott made his final diary entry.
Outside the door of the tent it remains a scene of whirling drift. We shall stick it out to the end, but we are getting weaker and the end cannot be far. It seems a pity, but I do not think I can write more.
Yet it is the hostility and inaccessibility of the region which seems to encourage people to want to go there.
My husband wouldn't go there for many years, and then he finally went down and made a programme for the BBC in Antarctica, and after that I think he was so excited by it was such a wonderful place that he was determined that it should be saved in its, in its posterity and its incredible sort of wildness and beauty. And as Captain Scott's daughter-in-law, I suppose, I think that I have to carry on this. Everything that I can do for Antarctica, I would.
I'm sure that people will wish to go on holiday in Antarctica. We all like the idea of following in the footsteps of the great explorers. It's a wonderful new thing. It's a way of keeping ahead of the Joneses. There are actually very positive things that one can put back into the environment by choosing a small specialist tour operator who's responsible, who cares about the places he's sending his clients.
There may be sound financial arguments for shutting down Australian research bases. Just running them and travelling between them accounts for 2/3 of the government's entire Antarctic budget. Tourism might, apart from anything else, bring in some money, but it follows an inexorable law that where today a man goes with a backpack, tomorrow comes a man with the plans for a hotel.
Joined now by Robin Davidson, the writer, who spent a great deal of time in solitary places, more deserts than Antarctica, and Peter Clarkson on the Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research. Robin Davidson, are you worried by the idea of developing tourism in Antarctica?
Yes. Temperamentally, I'm dead against it.
Why?
Well, thin end of the wedge, for one thing. I think Antarctica's got bigger problems, of course. Tourism might be the gentle end of it, but it would be nice to think that there was one place on the globe where human beings hadn't lifted their legs, so to speak. It's a, but it's a fantasy.
Right. Peter Clarkson, you surely can't welcome an invasion of tourists in Antarctica?
The problem is with tourism that if it starts to disrupt the scientific research, which is telling us so much about the planet, that we then start to worry that tourism is becoming a problem. But while the tourism is being very well organised, and this seems to be the case for most of it at the moment, then it is giving a lot of people an opportunity to see a part of the world that is virtually pristine wilderness, and I think they benefit by it, and people as a whole, and science too, can benefit insofar that more people know about the Antarctic, understand it, and this is a good thing.
Are the tourists already there?
Oh yes, I think last year, the last summer season, there were about 9,000 or 10,000 tourists recorded going to the Antarctic.
And how many do you think you could cope with?
That's very difficult to say. It's a very, very big place. It's half as big again as Australia, and it's capable of coping with a lot more. But they do need to be well organised, well regulated, just as the scientists do, because we're all people, be we scientists or tourists, and we can all damage the environment.
Well, that's, I mean, what you said at the moment, that it will be regulated well at the moment. Who's to say what's going to happen 5 years down the line?
Sir Vivian Fuchs was talking to one of my colleagues earlier this evening, Peter Clarkson, and he was absolutely horrified by the prospect. He pointed out, I don't want to be too crude about it, but there's an awful lot of waste generated by human beings for which there's no obvious way of disposing of in Antarctica.
Well, this is true, but under the new environmental protocol, under the Antarctic Treaty, most of the waste that's generated in Antarctica has to be removed, and if it's disposed of in Antarctica, it has to be properly treated. But if you go to an Antarctic base, the amount of waste that may be discharged into the sea is probably very small compared with, say, the amount of waste that a colony of elephant seals are actually putting into the sea, and their waste isn't being treated at all.
Let's look at this from a psychological point of view. Do you think that as human beings, as one of many, many creatures on the globe, our attitude to our environment changes, Robin Davidson, if there is no corner of that globe where you won't find other human beings?
I don't think there's really such a thing as wilderness, to tell you the truth.
Anymore?
Anymore, if there ever was. I know that when I was I walked across Australia, and I feel tremendously privileged to have seen it at a time before contemporary tourism got there. But the truth is that even though there were moments where I would be standing on a landscape where possibly no human being had stood before, nevertheless, that landscape had been profoundly changed by Aboriginal people through their technology. So it's a bit of a fantasy to have this idea of pure landscape.
Well, it certainly is the case in Antarctica.
Yes, well, even that has been somewhat changed, but I think it's more this idea that wilderness has become commodity. I think that's what's so tragic about it.
Okay, thanks very much. Tomorrow morning's front pages, I can show you one or two of them here. That's the Guardian, characteristically robust treatment of the, if we can get, is there any chance of a camera somewhere? Yes.